Hey, fellow Ristopians, welcome back to Ristopia. Oh, it's been a busy day today and yesterday. Everything's changing. I'm smoking. I'm going to just pop a glove on because there's quite a few watches and there might be some fingerprints I need to get off. I've got my scales with me today. Do a bit of weighing. My Uni scales. My Uni's like a pizza oven brand. I do like, one of my other passions is barbecuing and cooking in the garden. I'm smoking some ribs at the moment. They are a bit of a process. It's a lot of a process. It takes hours and hours, but hopefully they will be good later on today. So Christopher Ward C60. This is going to be a little bit rushed. Not rushed, but I kind of need to get this done, one and done. Although this is the third time I've started recording, and get back to those ribs. I've got a crib sheet here, and so where are we? So the C60 came yesterday. I did an unboxing. I've spent a bit of time with it. Obviously, it's only 24 hours, but I've tried to find out as much about it as I can to let you guys know. Christopher Ward obviously is not a brand that's available in the shop, so it's kind of unless you know someone that's got one, you've got to kind of order it, see if you like it, and if not, send it back. And on that point, one of the things with this was whether someone else had already had it. Now there are some marks on it. Nothing major. Well, say nothing major. One of the screwed, which would be the last one I look at, won't it? Which one is it? Is it that one? Maybe I can't see I can't actually see it too well in the light, but I think it is that one. It's either that one or. No, it's definitely that one. But one of them is from, so because this is male end links, quite a few male end link watches have screws there, so you can detach it from the male end link. And from that screw, there's a scratch, which is a bit strange because, I can see it now. I don't know if you guys can, but I've angled it in the light. So it goes from the screw about 45 degrees to the edge of the link. Now, that's weird because no one would have really touched that, so it is a bit weird that that's there. But it does seem like one of those scratches where someone slipped with a screwdriver rather than just scratch the watch. Anyway, that's there. There's one on the side of the clasp, but the weird one, or ones, there's two of them. Which side is it? There's two dings. There's a ding either side of that link, and it's where it hits the clasp. But the strange thing is that I can't see that seems to be a wear thing. I'm going to come back to that later on when I talk about the bracelet. So specs, as I've got my scales here, let's turn them on. Weight, so since I haven't taken any links out yet, 166 grams we've got for the C60 in 42mm with all links in. So specs, 120 click bezel. It's a nice bezel action, as I said yesterday. No back play. Bracelet is 22mm at the lugs. It tapers down to roughly 16.2 at the clasp. The clasp itself is 18.5. As I said, a 42mm case. It's about 11.7mm ish thick. And I'll come on to that in a bit. Maybe it had more. A full link, so it has two-part links. One, where are they? There are two-part links. Oh, there we go. So one there, and there's one hiding in there. It's a on-the-fly adjustment, or toolless adjustment, as I prefer to call it. There's the other half link, and that on toolless adjustment gives you 11mm of adjustment. So yeah, very, very adjustable. You should get this to fit you. I won't go into. It's quite big. So my 7¼ wrist, let's say 7.5, nearly 7.5 inch wrist. I think I'd need two full links out with the micro adjust fully in. So you've still got 11mm more to play with there. So I would say that this would fit quite large wrists. Now, the clasp length, let's do it back up. Clasp length is 43.5mm. Now, it's been said that it's a very long clasp, which it is. One thing that I've thought of, and I don't think I've ever heard this mentioned, is that, I mean, I would call this a dress diver. Now, I know a lot of people are going to be like, but I would say it was a dress diver. The reason is it's quite slim, and, you know, it's got a very thin bezel track. You could almost imagine that having, I mean, I'm not too clued up on Cristopher Ward watches. Maybe there is a version of this that isn't a diver. And you could have a bezel on there, like a fixed bezel, like a brushed bezel or polished bezel, whichever they wanted to put on there. And that would make it a completely different watch. I know it still have the crown guards, but I quite like a non-dive watch with crown guards. But anyway, I would call this a dress diver because it's quite thin. It also doesn't have a dive extension. A lot of watches don't have dive extensions these days, so that in itself doesn't make it a dress diver. But I'm not even sure if that's a term. I certainly don't mean it rudely. But one thing I did think of, one reason that well, obviously the clasp is this big to fit, you know, the mechanics in there that they've used. You've got the pushers to release the clasp, and then you've got the 11mm of micro adjustment there. You know, whether that could be engineered into a less long clasp is one thing. Now, but what that does mean, the longer the clasp is, and I really just thought of this today, when you open the watch up, it creates a bigger area. So if you've got gloves on, it's just, you can get it over, whether you're going to have like dive gloves on and you're going to take your watch on and off with them on, or I'm not sure, but it just dawned on me that means that it's a bigger overall diameter, circumference, whatever. So there's a bigger opening to put your hand in. Compared to, let's say, I've got my Longines Zulu time here, which has a shorter clasp. I did measure it earlier. It's a much shorter clasp. I think that has about 10mm of micro adjustment via, you know, the normal sort of push pins. Because that has a shorter clasp, and that means the free folds are also equally short, that opening is not as big. So you do, you know, when you're putting this on, you do tend, you know, there's not as much room. But, you know, it's not a dive watch, it's a GMT. But yeah, just a thought. So that's kind of the specs. Now, next on the list was just points about the watch. Now, rotor noise, as I've got the Zulu time here, one thing about this watch is the rotor is very noisy. I find it's one of the only watches that I own where wearing it, you can like notice the rotor. So that was one of the things I thought I'd check out on the Cristopher Ward. Yeah, it's fine. It's good. There's no excess rotor noise. The date change is also good. It starts to change from about 25 to 22, but in reality, although it's starting to change, it's not moving very much, and it actually snaps over pretty much at midnight. So I would say a very good date change. One thing that I'm going to actually try this again. One slightly weird thing was when you screw the crown in. I'm just going to take it away and put it next to my ear. I've got gloves on. Yeah, it's still doing it. I've not noticed it in any other watches, but when you screw the crown in, it makes a strange, or what I would describe as a strange clicking noise when it's being screwed back into the case. It's not just the winding noise. It's very different to the winding noise. It's a bit of an odd clicking noise. I don't know if anyone else has one of these and they've noticed that. You can also feel it, and you don't have to put it to your ear to hear it. You can hear it from the normal distance away from your ear, which is why I notice it. And it's a slightly uncomfortable noise. But not quite sure why it would make that noise. I don't have any other watches that have ever done that I've noticed. Now we've got I'll leave one thing till last on the points note. I think it's too much taper. So it goes from 22, as I said, down to 16.2. I think that's a bit too much. And what that means is that I think that's why the clasp gets mentioned as being very long, because over here I have this is the watch that I felt it really looked like when I saw it on the website, my Planet Ocean 43.5mm, if I get it the right way up. Now I think they're very similar. Part of that is the colour and also the sort of thinner bezel track. It's even thinner on the Cristopher wall, but I just felt there was a lot of similarities between these two pieces. But actually, this has a 43.5mm long clasp as well. Although it does manage to fit a dive extension in there along with a micro adjust. It isn't quite as much micro adjust, but which actually isn't great really, because it doesn't, unless the half links have come out. I didn't take the links out of this, so I can't remember what's in the box. Yeah, it doesn't have half links. I'm not sure. It might have. They might just be in the box. But yeah, so it's the same length clasp, but because it's so much wider, so this tapers from also from 22, but it goes down to 18, and the actual clasp is probably is near on 20mm wide. So because it just gives it a completely different dimension. It doesn't look. I mean, it's obviously bigger, but it doesn't look as long. It kind of loses its length because it's wider. And I do think that the Cristopher Ward would have benefited from not having so much taper. I think it makes it look a bit cheap, if I'm honest. But I'm not knocking the watch. Overall, I think it's a lovely watch for the money if you like if you like the design and aspects about it. I've got likes and dislikes coming up. So I think the taper's too much. I mentioned the case back yesterday. I'm not really a fan of open case backs, and that movement isn't really anything to write home about in terms of visuals. I don't think. Looks nice enough. You can see it beating there, so that's always nice. I do like the sort of bent oval parts on the case back that are used to unscrew the case back. I just think they look really good, and it made me think. Whereas going back to the Planet Ocean, I don't like that scalloped case back on this, but it's on the back. It isn't on the front. On the 300m, the Seamaster Professional 300, it's got a scalloped bezel, which I couldn't do. It's not for me. This has it on the back. This is pretty much my favourite watch, as I've said before. So it's got a couple of things I would change. They're on the back, so it doesn't really matter. But it did make me think that even having something on the back that you don't see when you're wearing it, I think it still adds to the enjoyment of wearing the watch. I don't know if that sounds strange, but I just like knowing that it has that design on the back. I haven't really thought that about any other watch before. It's like, I like it, I don't like it. Well, that's not quite true. There's a Grand Seiko with a display case back, and it has a printed one of their printed lions on it, and it just looks silly, and you kind of know that it's there when you're wearing it. I find it annoying. But this, I actually like the fact that it's on the back. And what was the last thing? Oh, that's right. I left one of the points was this has something I've never seen before. I'll have to hold it a bit closer. It has this inner track to the bezel, let's say, just outside of the crystal. And it's marked with 5-minute markers and then minute hash, smaller minute hash marks. But it doesn't move. When you rotate the bezel, it doesn't move. And I would have expected that to move. If I'd just seen a picture of this, I would have expected that to move with the bezel. But it doesn't. It's there. And I can't work out what that's for. I think maybe it's a design thing. I'm trying not to get too much reflection. I think maybe it's a design thing. And I do quite like it as a design thing. I think it gives it a nice rehaul, because that's part of the rehaul under the crystal. That sort of chamfered bit just coming up from the dial. But I don't see it has any point. If you know what point there is to that those markings, obviously minute marks, then let me know in the comments below. But I kind of worked out that if you use the bezel. I use the dive bezel to time stuff all the time. If you use that, and then it elapses, and let's say you're there, actually being 120 click bezel, it means you've got half-minute increments on that timing. It doesn't actually help you. It doesn't. I thought maybe it would help you identify where the hand was, but it doesn't, as far as I can work out. But if you know different, let me know. So I have to put my glasses back on now. Now, bracelet. So I did mention, there was another YouTuber that had, that reviewed this watch in black, and I did sort of moan at him for saying, he said that, that the bracelet was better than Rolex and Omega. So he picked the two best bracelets on the high street and said that this was better than them. I'm going to try and make this brief. I mean, it obviously wasn't going to be better. So I thought I'd have the Omega and a Rolex, and I've actually got a Tudor here as well, just for good measure, to try and explain why. I just think it's just a silly thing to say, and I think, I'm not having a go at him if you might recognise who said that, or other lots of people might have said it, other people might have said it. I just think it's a silly thing to say, and I think it takes credibility away from what you're saying if you just say, oh yeah, it's better than the, most people would agree Rolex make the best bracelet. Love them or hate them, they make the best bracelet on watches on the high street kind of thing. And I think it's just a silly thing to say. So I thought I'd compare it. Now, bracelets, I must say, once you go above a certain point, I'm not going to say they're the same, but it's difficult to quantify why one bracelet is better than another. But I'll try and do that. So for me, every Rolex I've ever noticed has things like polished. So it's brushed on the front. It's brushed and polished, whereas the Cristopher Ward is just brushed, and that's just plain easier to do. Now you might say, well, I don't want polishing. I want it brushed. But that's not really the point. The point is that the quality of the bracelet in that polishing or in other aspects. So the clasp. So I don't think what I have said is this must be about 25 years old, my vintage. I think that makes it vintage now. Sea Dweller. Now, I've got this out to compare it to because this is really old. Now, but it's still, I would say, a better quality bracelet. Now, I've worn this, so it's had 25 years of, it's had years of use over that 25-year period, and it's got some stretch on it. It's an older bracelet, but I still think even, with and this one has a pressed steel clasp, but just the quality of this bracelet that was made all those years ago is better than that one, I would say. Let's have a look. The screws are nicer. The screws aren't too bad on the Cristopher Ward. The ones holding it onto the end links are a bit dodge looking, but I haven't unscrewed these, so I don't know. I haven't unscrewed these, to be honest, but I haven't unscrewed these, so I don't actually know how good they are. But just looking at them, they don't look quite as good. Nothing's quite as good. And the clasp. Let's move on to a more modern. I didn't get a more modern Rolex to compare to, but let's say a Tudor, and I know this is titanium, but then again, titanium's harder to work with, so that in itself must make this a better bracelet. And the clasp on this, it's got that early sort of toolless adjustment on there, which was I quite like what it looks like. I think it could be better than it is, but the fact is it's got a very complicated clasp. It's a better engine, it's a higher engineering level of engineering to the clasp, so that again I would say was better. You might not want that functionality, but it's still better. And then, as I've mentioned already, you've got things like dive extensions. Here's an Omega, and again, I just think the quality of this bracelet is higher than the quality on the Cristopher Ward. I'm not knocking the Cristopher Ward, but to say it's a Rolex Omega level bracelet is pushing it. But for the money, I mean, this cost. When I got this, it was 5 times more than probably 6 times what this cost. So, for the money, I'm not knocking the Cristopher Ward at all, but I'm just saying, you have to accept the limitations on the bracelet. Now, I'll come back to those weird marks. Before I do, the other thing I noticed is that the half links are a bit odd. They're not. It's like they've been chopped off. That one right nearest to clasp isn't a half link. The next one to it is, but it's not. Normally half links are the same shape as the full links, but this has sort of been weirdly chopped off, even though it joins one that's the same shape. So it basically has a different shape at the end to the next one, which is kind of odd. And it's things like these then that if you're going to talk about bracelet quality, you're looking at quite small details. So just doing that, I mean, that's not, you're going to say it doesn't matter. I don't mind. You don't look at it. I don't. But if you're literally just talking about the bracelet quality, then I think these things all come into play. I'm going to have to look at my notes. Slightly opponent links mentioned that. Mentioned the screws are not overly great, but I've not used them. Now, going back to those marks on the link there. Now, I don't know if you can see them with that light, but basically there's one on each side, just about a quarter of the way up into the link, and they are clearly caused by hitting the clasp. Now, I would have thought that wouldn't particularly happen from the factory, and so therefore I don't know, I'm kind of thinking someone's worn this, but then again, you know, would they have polished it? You know, I don't even know if they're polish outable. They're not massive, but the annoying thing is though that you can see them when you're wearing it. So it's, even though they're caused by hitting the clasp, they're not hidden by that. They're not in line with it. And the reason for that is that there's so much movement in that where that link goes into the clasp, that it just, when you're wearing it, it's just going to keep going up and bashing. So that's why I think that's been caused over time. I mean, how much time? I mean, I don't mind the marks. I haven't got a problem. They're going to be caused by me wearing it, so I don't really mind that someone else has done it. I'm not that fussy about a watch that I would wear. But again, I don't think that's the greatest design. I've looked at other watches here, and really that's the only one that I could find that had that pivot there that is going to keep bashing that. And the more it bashes it, the bigger that mark's going to get. It's not the end of the world. I mean, my Omega's scratched because it is, you know, I've worn it quite a lot. It's scratched to, it's not scratched to hell, but it's, you know, it's marked. I don't mind it. I'm not knocking it. I'm just pointing that out. So going on to my, where are we now? God, 22 minutes. My likes and dislikes then. Let's wrap it up. I like the weight. I like the feel. I like the colour. I really love the colour of that dial. It's you know, it's almost a tealy blue. Let's just quickly compare. I mean, it's very similar. It's just slightly, maybe slightly more tealy. But I love this watch, so therefore I'm really gonna. I love blue and silver, and having the orange accents, which is exactly the same, the colours on the Seamaster. So yeah, which another reason why as soon as I saw this, it just reminded me of the Seamaster. And yeah, so the colour of the dial, the look, the weight, and the feel. What am I not too keen on? For me, it's too thin. Which is why I've called it, for me, it's like I would describe it as a dress dive watch. It's going to be a lot easier to wear. Now, this is you wear this for a week non-stop, and you know that you're wearing it. It does tend to sort of become a bit, I'm not going to say uncomfortable, but you kind of you when you then change it for a different watch, you think, oh great, I've got that's good. Woo. But equally, I absolutely love wearing it. But yeah, so this would be a lot more wearable. And guys, a lot of guys just seem to complain about thickness of watches. It's not something that I complain about. There's my Tudor again. I quite like a chunky watch, let's say. I even quite like a watch that's a bit hockey puck-ish. I haven't got one here, but there's a few Seikos that are like that. But I just still think this is too thin. Now, if you compare it to, if I get the old Longines back again, so this is 11.7, this is 12.7 this has a domed crystal rather than a flat sapphire. But if you measured it with the same, rays rising of crystal, so if you imagine this had a flat sapphire, this would be about no more than a millimetre thicker, but I would say it looks way less than a millimetre difference. This looks thinner. Now, lots of you are going to think, yeah, great, I love that, that's great. I just think it looks too thin. And what they've done is they've gone to great lengths to get that, to have all this chamfering, to leave the actual flat side of the case being not very high at all. So, and there's quite a lot below the case on that case back. But yeah, it's just one of my dislikes. But saying that, if I kept this, I'm kind of wearing it as a thinner watch, as a dressier watch. So it then kind of wouldn't be a dislike. But I would just prefer it if it just, not even be thicker, but maybe just look a bit thicker. I just find that very thin. But it's personal taste. Now, the other thing I mentioned yesterday, it's just a couple more. I'm going to have to get my phone in a minute to show you the last one. And it's my least favourite thing about this, which I don't know if anyone's ever mentioned before. As I say, I don't watch too many reviews. That kind of sandblasting on the crown. I just think the crown overall just looks really cheap. It doesn't go with the quality of the rest of the watch. It just sits there and to me looks a bit cheap. So it's got that sort of sandblasted effect. You know, apart obviously the actual Cristopher logo is polished. Everything else is polished or brushed, but that's polished and I would call sandblasted. And that sandblasting is also on the ridge, the internal bits of the ridges on the actual crown. And I just think it looks a bit cheap, and it's a shame. It makes the whole crown, even the contrast between that and the polishing, that the whole crown just looks cheap. Some of that might be the logo, although I do like the logo. I mean, it's not too dissimilar on what watch was I looking at? I was looking at one that had a not too dissimilar crown. I mean, I guess because that's recessed. I won't go into this too much, but because that's recessed, they can't. I assume they can't brush the inside of that. So that's the only option, because the crown, there's a ridge on the outside, and obviously the Cristopher logo is ridged. Whereas on, let's say, the Omega logo is proud. So I don't know how they make these things, but the Omega crown looks more brushed than sandblasted. And that, I think it just spoils it. But it's not a biggie. Again, nothing's a biggie. It's a lot of watch, I think, for £900. The last thing that I'm going to have to get my phone to show you, because I haven't got a loop handy. Not that that would help filming. Let me get some photos. There we go. It's the hour hand. So it's, what would you call that? A spear. It's like a very pointed triangle, hour hand. Nothing wrong with that. On the Omega, it's an arrow hand. And it's polished edges with filled with lume. But this one isn't. This one, well, it is that, but then maybe you can see it better on there. Let me turn the camera, the light off. I'll have to explain it. They've brushed, so it's polished on most of the triangle, but it's brushed right at the end. Not only that, but the brushing chamfers it down to a point, which I find really weird. So this pointy bit of the hour hand is a lot thinner than the rest of it. Whereas, let's say on the Omega, as an example, it's the same thickness, the whole hand. I find that a bit weird. And what it does, you can't really see it from this picture, or maybe you can. But although that's a perfect triangle, when it catches the light, where's it gone? When it catches the light, and I've turned the light off, but when it catches the light, it basically gives it an effect. Because polished surfaces sometimes reflect the light and reflect things around, in the room. They almost end up looking invisible, like they're not there, and it gives it. I think you probably can see it. Actually, I think you can see it on the camera more than I can looking at my phone. I can see it on the camera lens, camera viewfinder, but different. So it gives it this kind of weird, sort of shaped, pointy, white thing. I suppose because the brushing looks a similar tone to the white lume. Whereas if they just left it all polished, it wouldn't do that. I just find that a bit weird. I find it's bugging me. But yeah, that's my worst bit. But yeah, hope you've enjoyed the video. It's gone on 30-minute video. Time flies when you're having fun. But I do really like the watch. I hope I haven't come across at all negative. Because Cristopher Ward is a brand that you can't go in the shop and look at, and you have to order it. I hope some of those things, along with other people's reviews, have been useful. But I've really got to end it now. I've got to go and check on my ribs. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions or dislikes, likes. But for now, one wrist, live it.